Hello, and welcome to the first ever episode of The Big Picture on the Rider University Network. My name is Zachary Klein, and on today's show, we've got an update on the vaccine rollout for children, a look at the MLB postseason, and a preview of the New Jersey governor's race. Stay tuned. You're watching The Big Picture on the Rider University Network. This past week, the White House took a significant step forward in its plan to vaccinate the nation's children. For this and more, here's Anthony Corbi with this week's weekly recap.
The White House has begun to lay out a plan to vaccinate the nation's population of children between the ages of 5 and 11 against COVID-19. Pending formal decisions from the FDA and CDC, which are both expected to be given within the first week of November, the White House intends on shipping the vaccines to pediatricians within hours of the approval to administer the vaccine to young children. Unlike the initial vaccine rollout earlier this year, the Biden administration expects the rollout of vaccinations to be quick, with little wait time between approval and widespread availability. Early last week, former Secretary of State Colin Powell died at the age of 84. Powell served as a national security advisor during the latter days of the Reagan administration, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff under George H.W. Bush, and the Secretary of State under George W. Bush. In the MLB, the stage is set for the 2021 World Series. The Houston Astros took down the Boston Red Sox in the ALCS, while the Los Angeles Dodgers were taken down by the underdog Atlanta Braves in the NLCS. Both series ended in 6 games, paving the way for an Astros-Braves World Series beginning Tuesday night in Houston.
And Anthony Corbi joins me now. Hi, Anthony.
How you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm pretty good.
So today we will be talking about the New Jersey governor's race, with the general election is Tuesday, November 2nd. Early voting is open now, however, so people are already flocking to the polls. The race is between Democratic incumbent Phil Murphy and Republican candidate Jack Ciattarelli. So what do you think of these two candidates, Anthony?
Well, I think it's a tight race right now, tighter than I think the Democrats would like. I mean, for New Jersey, New Jersey obviously hasn't reelected a Democrat as governor in, a few decades. I think I read since like 1970s. So the fact that the race is tightening up, I think in terms of the candidates, I think Murphy, they're better Democrats from my perspective. And, from a Republican standpoint, they're obviously better Republicans. I think Ciattarelli's trying to make himself seem like a moderate, but as Murphy and all the Democrats have proven, and even Ciattarelli himself has proven throughout the race, he's not a moderate candidate. He's a lot more like Trump than he wants people to let on. The race, the primary, wasn't really exactly about Trump versus moderate Republicans. It was Trump versus slightly less Trump Republican. And we're kind of really seeing that in the general election now. As for Phil Murphy, I think that a lot of what's bringing him down is he's having to answer for the stuff with COVID. He's responded to the nursing home thing, but a lot of what's kind of bringing him down is, people in New Jersey, they're not really politically engaged. They just want to live their lives. There are some other parts of the country where people are more politically engaged, like in California, but in New Jersey, people aren't as involved with their politics. So people just want, in New Jersey, to have a path forward that's free of having to wear masks, that's free of COVID generally. And I think the fact that COVID is still here in New Jersey, and the National Democratic Party promised that it would be over at the end of the Trump administration when Biden took over, that's kind of weighing him down as well. So I think that's kind of the reason that the race is tightening right now, and a lot of people aren't happy with the way the state is right now. And the property taxes, Murphy hasn't exactly responded to those. I agree with him on a lot of the issues with taxation, but he definitely needs to, have a better grip on the issues. And unfortunately, the debates are over, but he should have been very vocal about, the effects of taxes and where they're actually going instead of just kind of brushing them off.
Yeah, and I think the two biggest issues that we have in this election right now are property taxes and COVID. And we've seen each candidate, Chitterelli had an ad against Murphy about property taxes, and now the Democratic PAC in New Jersey has responded with an ad that features quotes from both Donald Trump and Jack Chitterelli about COVID and vaccine mandates. So I think it's really a big issue when we look at this race. These are the two biggest things that voters are going to be looking for. And New Jersey is not really a politically engaged state. Voter turnout will probably not be above 40 to 50% in this election, even with the new early voting. So voter turnout, what do you think about voter turnout in this election?
Yeah, it's probably going to be definitely lower than the presidential election, and that's kind of reflected in the polls that survey likely voters. It doesn't look at all like the election last year, where obviously in a state like New Jersey, Biden was pushing Trump out of the water, and I think that New Jersey was one of the first states that was actually called in last year's election.
Yeah, I think that's
because
correct.
They didn't even really need to consider the fact that Trump might pull back into it. In a state like New Jersey or New York, it's pretty much set in stone from the start. But I think voter turnout's definitely going to be down, which is kind of a shame. The fact that a lot of people still don't know who Chitterelli is also kind of sad. Even though I'm not voting for the guy, people should definitely be more involved in politics, in my mind, and should at least know who the two candidates are in this election.
Yeah, like I think a lot of people, especially in our demographic, they don't vote in elections that are not presidential elections because they're not familiar with the candidates that are running. And I think that the candidates need to spread their footprint a little bit to people that are in the younger age groups, because those are the people that if our age group isn't voting in the elections, they're not going to vote when they turn 30, 40, 50, and then voter turnout is just going to be on a steady decline from there on out. So I think that also with this election, it is going to kind of set the tone for the voter turnout for 2022 midterms, which are going to be crucial across the country. So my next question is, I guess, a prediction for the Democratic or for the New Jersey election.
Well, it's tightening now. I still think that Phil Murphy's going to win, but here's the thing. Jack Chitterelli has really ramped it up with the advertising. You see signs all around the state of New Jersey with Jack's name on them. Jack for governor or just Jack for NJ. Whereas Phil Murphy, he didn't start running ads until later, and he said the other day that his game plan isn't to run out the clock, but run like he's 10 points down. I don't really see it, because all you see if you go outside are, like, they just put signs up outside of my neighborhood this past weekend, the Jack Chitterelli campaign. There still isn't a sign for Phil Murphy. There are a few school board candidates around the area, but you still don't see any from Murphy. And all I've seen from Murphy on TV is the one ad where Jack Chitterelli has multiple advertisements. And apparently Murphy's out raising the guy. Mm-hmm. So he should be spending more than, or we should be seeing more than what we're seeing from his campaign. If he's, if he has more money than Chitterelli at this point, then there's really no excuse for, and you see now that the polls are tightening. I mean, we were just talking about that beforehand. It was last week. There were polls that came, or even before that, there were polls that came out that showed the race was 50-41 in favor of Murphy. This week, they're 50-44. So the gap is narrowing, which is, obviously a bit of a problem if you're in the Phil Murphy campaign. And part of that has to do with the debates, but I think also part of that has to do with the fact that we don't see that much from Phil Murphy, except for the one kind of cliche advertisement about Jack Chitterelli being extreme. Which I don't disagree with, but it kind of just sounds like every other political ad that has ever been created. So I think Murphy definitely has to ramp it up in the advertising in the final days of the campaign.
Yeah, we definitely need to see Murphy ramping it up with the advertising. I actually don't believe that ad that you're referring to is even an ad that was paid for by the Murphy campaign. I believe it is by a PAC group. So I have actually seen very little Murphy advertising out there. But I'll have to agree with Anthony on this one. I think that even though the polls are tightening, I think that this is a Democratic state. This is a Democratic stronghold. I don't see Chitterelli being the Republican candidate that beats Murphy, even though Murphy kind of is not liked by a lot of people in the state. I think that Chitterelli is not the guy that the Republican Party could have put forward. It's not their strongest candidate that they could have put forward in this election.
Yeah, and also, we've kind of seen, going back to the advertising thing, we've seen more ads in the last year. If you live in Burlington County, we've seen more ads for Andy Kim this year than we have for Phil Murphy. And it's not even an election year for the U.S. House. So just the fact that Andy Kim, who's not running for re-election this year, is, I think that's also a New Jersey PAC that's running that. But the fact that we're seeing more for that instead of the actual race at hand this year is kind of sad from a Democrat's perspective.
Thank you, Tony. The New Jersey gubernatorial election polls are open now for early voting. If you are a registered voter in Mercer County, you can visit any of the 9 early voting sites. Election day is Tuesday, November 2nd. Polls are open from 6 a.m. until 8 p.m. That's going to do it for week 1 of our show. From Anthony, Corbi, and our entire broadcasting crew, we thank you for watching and hope to see you next time here on The Big Picture.